So I thought I'd make a video showing this costume rather than just posting photos, because I thought it might be cool to give you a more in-depth look at one of my costumes. This is the Serafimo maid costume from Phantom. It's seen in Il Muto, and she wears it as a disguise. I'll start from the top. Okay, here's the hat that she wears, and it's so cute. And it's just made from a really large circle of fabric. It's 2 layers, so I have it lined in cotton. And what you do is you sew a channel through here, and then you insert elastic into it, pull it tight, and that's how you get the shape. Just like in the original costume, the trims that are used in the hat are different than the trims used in the skirt here. And it was actually some extra trims that we had, which worked out really well. And I hand stitched these down, and you can't really machine stitch them because they kind of like poof out, so you have to only sew 1 layer. And those wrap all the way around to the back. And there's actually a spacing in them right here, so when the elastic stretches, it's not pulling on the stitches. It also has lace on the edge here, and this lace is seen throughout the costume. The shirt on the original costume, it looks like it's like a silk or a satin that has polka dots on it, but we were kind of pressed for time, so we couldn't really find that. Instead, I just used a quilting cotton that had the polka dots on it. And then in the front, there's different layers of lace. There's this silver lace. It's embroidered thread on tulle. It's really pretty. It actually has a lavender tint to it, which it might not show up on camera, but it goes really nice with the polka dots. And then I have this burnout charmeuse type fabric. It drapes really well, and I attached the white lace onto the edge of it, and then I ruffled it to make this trim. The collar goes over the draped lace, and I didn't decorate the inside, or rather the shirt is not lined, so where the seam was, I just put this little white trim just to decorate it a little bit. And the shirt opens in the front with snaps. There's a couple snaps. It gets tucked into the belt too. And it's actually not as low cut as it looks on the mannequin. On a person, it looks a lot better naturally. Moving over to the sleeves, you can see that they're gathered right here, and that falls like somewhere in between the elbow and the wrist. And I have the same silver lavender tulle that hangs down from it. I also have more white lace over it, and then a bow. In the real costume, I think there's a bow that's made out of the shirt fabric, but I thought it might just be, it might tie it into the shirt or the ruffles on the front and the skirt drapery better if I used that burnout charmeuse, so that's what I went with. And then there's also ribbon flowers. The belt is made out of this really nice velvet. It's 2 layers. And then I also edged it in this matte black bias tape just to make it look a little bit more clean and crisp and fancier. And the bow in the back, is also made out of the same velvet. It's edged, all the parts are edged in that bias tape. There's strips that hang down. like that. And the bow is actually completely detachable with snaps. And just to be able to get into the costume easier. And it closes with hooks in the back here. I have a couple different hooks for different sizes. Sorry if this is awkward. I'm doing this with one hand, so forgive me. The strips that hang down, they're just sewn onto the belt here. So those stay on, and then the bow just gets attached in the back. Okay, so part of the overskirt, or this drapery, is attached here, but then also there's a snap right here, just so it's easier to get into the skirt. And so once you close the belt and close the snaps, and you can reattach the bow. And that's how that works. There's ribbon flowers decorating the back of the drapery. This drapery here, basically I made it by cutting out the fabric, and then I gathered the fabric, and then I sewed the gathered fabric to this black trim. And that trim actually looks like this. And I actually used it on my Minta costume too. But we chose a kind of a sage green flower trim that goes over that. And then there's a bunch of these ribbon flowers hand stitched on there. And they're different types and sizes. And the lace that hangs down, this is the same fabric used up here, and there's more of the white lace that edges it, and that's just ruffled and sewn onto the black as well. And I just love this fabric, this burnout charmeuse. It's really soft and it drapes well. I found it on closeout at Joann's a couple years ago. I stashed it away so I could use it for dressing gown ruffles because I thought it looked kind of like the fabric that they use, but I was having trouble finding something that I liked to use for this part of the costume, so I decided to take it out of my stash and use it on this costume. And so I sucked it up and I used it on this costume, and I love it though. I love how it looks with this. Okay, then the skirt. Oh god, the skirt. It's not made of fabric, striped fabric, but it's a bunch of ribbons sewn onto fabric. And I'll lift this up to show you what the fabric underneath looks like. It's really pretty. It's this pink and silver fabric, and it's also completely lined in cotton to make it more stable. And you can see all the ribbons used in the costume. And if you've seen my progress photos, you'll know that this black ribbon had to be stitched on first. And then the other ribbons were stitched on after that. And the skirt, it's kind of like a circular type skirt, so you can't just stitch these down. They had to kind of be folded on each other, or like crimped, or to keep it flat on the costume. So that was kind of a challenge, to make sure it was perfectly even and horizontal and getting everything to lay nice and flat. The hem doesn't look that substantial, but oh man, it was like 4, 5, 6 yards before I had to attach it. It was a really big hem. I have a photo of it. It took a lot of materials and a lot of time. It's slightly box pleated at like every other ribbon here, just at the top, to give it fullness and to give it its shape. Alright, so that's the Serafimo maid costume. Something I once thought was simple, but just like any other Phantom costume, I was completely wrong. Nothing is simple. But it's okay because I had such a blast making this, and I am so happy with how it turned out. So it's all good. If you ever want to make this costume, be prepared to use more materials than you think that you'll ever need. I should go through how much stuff I used on it because it's pretty surprising. If you haven't fallen asleep by now, stick with me. I used 3 yards of, there's like a pink ribbon here. It's actually not a spacing in the fabric, it's a ribbon. The black ribbon, I used 72 yards of it. Yards, not feet. 72 yards. That's like, what would that be? Like 216 feet? Anyway, it was a lot. Thankfully, the spools were cheap. I pretty much depleted the entire supply of black ribbon with a looped edge within like a 50-mile radius of me. The blue trim, this is really close to what's used in the original costume. Shout out to Darcy for finding that for me in New York City. It's just awesome. And the gold trim came from India, and oh, it's so pretty. My customer actually found the other 3 trims. She spent hours looking for them to try and match the ones on the original costume, and they were just such great finds. The white trim I used about 10 yards of, and the cream trim with the pink I used about 10 yards of. For the hat I used about 1 yard of the pink and 1 yard of the blue. I used, for the actual fabric, I used about ½ a yard to 3/4 of a yard of both this fabric and the cotton lining. The shirt used about a yard of the polka dotted cotton, and this gray, the silver lace, but I only had 2 yards, so I had to use it really sparingly on both the shirt and the sleeves. I used about 3 yards of this black and pink trim and 3 yards of the flower trim. And as for the ribbon flowers, there's about 40 of them on the costume. The drapery, I used about 3 yards of this fabric, and that includes the ruffled edge and the ruffles that are on the shirt. And the belt and the bow, I used only a yard of the nice velvet. I just used it really carefully, and it turned out okay. And the bias tape, I probably used about 8 or 9 yards of this stuff. The actual skirt fabric, the pink and silver stuff, I used about 4½ yards of that. And I think most of it was put into the hem because the hem is pleated, so it's quite a bit of fabric used there. Okay, so I probably forgot something, but this video is getting really long. And if you watched the entire thing, well then, congratulations. For people that don't know already, I have a Facebook page. It's facebook.com/aksewing. And from there you can see more photos, and I also have a blog, and you can find all that information there. And yes, I do custom commissions. This is one of them, so this is an example of my work. And I hope you enjoyed watching. So until next time.